Hey, it's 6 o'clock, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project Final Community Advisory Group meeting. We're really excited that you all joined us this evening. I know we have some exciting competition for your time with the Mariners playing in a big game, so we're even more appreciative that you're here. Nicole is gonna kick us off with our meeting tonight.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Nicole McIntosh. I'm the Director of Terminal Engineering for Washington State Ferries. As a civil engineer, I spent the first 25 years of my career in terminal engineering before serving as Washington State Ferries Chief of Staff for the past 6 years. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to return and once again lead this great department. I have heard a lot about this group over the years. Your dedication and commitment to the project really helped us meet this important milestone. I have met a few of you, so it's nice to see your faces again. But I look forward to hearing more this evening from you and hearing about how all of your input helped shape the Pell. So Dave Sowers is not here with us this evening, but he did ask that I thank you for your contribution in the CAG over the last several years. And although, as Laura mentioned, this is the last CAG meeting, we are looking forward to continuing to collaborate with you as this project moves forward.
Thank you, Nicole. So before we start, I also want to welcome community members who are here in attendance. Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Laura Labissener-Miller, and I will be facilitating tonight's meeting. We encourage you to email your comments at any time to our project team, and we will drop that email into the chat so you have that available. We do record these meetings and we will be posting the video on our project website for anyone who couldn't attend live. And then we also just have some friendly reminders for our CAG members about the Zoom features. You're all very familiar at this point with this online format. So we will use that again this evening. And then we have our agenda for you. So first, we are going to recap the Pell study as it ends, and then we will share an update on the upcoming intersection work, including the installation of the traffic signal, before we move on for an update on the property acquisition process as part of this project. And finally, we'll close out with an overview of next steps for what's coming for the project and how we'll continue to engage with the community as we move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Hadley to share an update on the project timeline.
Good evening, everyone. So great to see so many of you here for our final CAG meeting. It's been a long process, but we've really appreciated everything you've helped us with to get to this point. So I just wanted to quickly recap the timeline and where we've been, especially for members of the community joining or those of us who have forgotten, because it's been a bit since our last meeting. In the very near future, we'll be closing out the Pell phase of the process, the planning and environmental linkages study phase of the process, and we'll be moving into environmental review. Our last major milestone of this process is the Federal Highway Administration's approval of the Pell study report, and then they will identify what level of environmental review we'll be doing, and we'll move into that NEPA and SEPA process early in the next year. We're also going to be concurrently working on final design and moving into construction of the intersection improvements, the signal at the entrance to the terminal. And then we'll be continuing with community engagement as well and developing a new community engagement plan. So we've been using this roadmap graphic on the next slide throughout our entire process. So it's kind of fun to look back and see where we've been over the last several years. Each of these squares represents 1 or 2 or 3 meetings where we considered a topic and refined the alternatives that we've been considering. So we're here at the green box, the final step in this whole process. And as I mentioned, there's one more kind of official step in the Pell process, which is FHWA's approval of the Pell study report after we've had a chance to talk to you all about it and incorporate some of the comments that you've already started to share with us. So now I'm going to move into a little bit of discussion on the Pell study report. And we were hoping that Marcia Tolan, who, as you all know, is our environmental and permitting lead, would also be here to tag team with me on this part of the presentation, but she unfortunately had a family emergency and is not able to be here. So I'm going to do my best, and we will try to answer as many questions about Pell as we can. And we can always circle back with Marcia after this meeting if we're not able to answer them. So moving into another graphic that we've been using, another sort of depiction of this process, we started with a range of alternatives that looked at different locations, different dock sizes, different configurations. We moved through the level 2 screening and then into the level 3 screening. And then now we've narrowed down the range of alternatives to identify the B alternatives footprint to recommend for further review. So here again is just a recap, so it's fresh in your mind as we use some of this terminology tonight. Here's the range of alternatives. The A alternatives were the dock that's similar in size to the dock that we have there today that holds about 80 vehicles. The B alternatives are longer and narrower than the current dock, and they hold a range of 124 to 155 vehicles. And then C was the largest option that's both wider and longer and held about 180 vehicles. So when we talk about advancing the B alternatives, we're really talking about advancing the ones, a narrower dock, a narrow dock that's longer out into deeper water, and looking at a holding capacity of 124 to 155 cars. So this really shows the specific of the alternative that we're advancing. The Pell study report summarizes the planning process and then says that we're going to carry forward alternatives B and B3 with an on-dock holding capacity of 124 and 155 vehicles within that general footprint of those two B alternatives. This both moves the ferry slip to deeper water and avoids impacts to Cove Park, which was a really important feature that we identified early on with your help, that we need to avoid that part to the north of the terminal. Also, moving the ferry slip to deeper water also helps reduce propeller wash in the sensitive nearshore area. As we've talked about many times, that shaded dark green area is the eelgrass beds on both sides of the dock. And moving out into deeper water, you can see the existing dock underneath really will help us get away from that sensitive area. So the next steps will be continuing to refine that footprint and then beginning to move into more in-depth environmental review. But I wanted to go back over what got us here, and that is all the community input that we've had over the last several years. And although there's been sort of differences of opinions and different priorities from different communities, the things that we've heard that are consistent are strong support for replacing the aging dock, making sure that it's seismically sound and viable as a future transportation connection, minimizing impacts to the surrounding environment. We've all learned a lot about that nearshore area near the Fauntleroy terminal, and then building a terminal that operates more efficiently than today, both to move traffic on Fauntleroy Way more efficiently, but also to move customers to Vashon and Southworth more efficiently and improve just daily operations. So because of this input, that's really helped us focus our decision to recommend the dock footprint based on the B alternatives that meets all three of those elements. So what's coming next? As I mentioned, FHWA will help us identify the level of environmental review. Then we'll move into doing that environmental review. At this point, we expect that it could be an EA, but we're waiting for that decision from FHWA. And this will allow us to officially close out the Pell phase and move the study forward. And during this next phase, we'll be studying noise, visual impacts, more in-depth environmental studies, all of those elements. And we're also committed to going above and beyond any NEPA-SEPA requirements for community engagement to proactively keep engaging all of you through the next phases of the project. And we'll be engaging you in things like the traffic, air quality, noise studies, and all of the other elements of NEPA and SEPA, as well as the design of the terminal and operational decisions, both during construction and once the terminal is complete. We're also going to be continuing to work on the intersection and working to secure full funding for the project. So with that, I think we'll just pause for a bit. And I know many of you had a chance to review the Pell study that we sent by email. Some of you sent us comments ahead of time. But I think, Laura, you were going to let's take some questions and answers at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Hadley. Yes, we do have time for just questions at this point. Like Hadley mentioned, we've received a few comments from you all or several of you, and so if you'd like to bring those into the conversation, we're happy to answer them as best we can, especially without Marcia being here. We can also, be prepared to email you back as well. So I think with that, really just interested in hearing if you have any questions, any lingering questions about how the report summarizes the process, or any of the information that was presented to this group, or really just any final thoughts as we conclude the Pell study.
I wasn't sure if I'm supposed to raise my hand, but I just have a quick question about, I see that it says you're going to study a dock that'll be 124 to 155 vehicles. How will that be determined? Like what's going to lead to 155 or 124?
Yeah, that's a good question, Susan. So I think part of that is about the process. So what process will we be using to move and further evaluate the terminal options between 124 and 155, and what will that look like? Charlie, would you like to speak to that question?
Sure. I'll give it a shot. People can follow up if they like. I think one important goal of ours was to be operationally efficient, and our operational staff has requested a way to uh, sort vehicles. Currently, they struggle to do that with the 4 lanes that we have when the dock is all full. I think the 124 car capacity, that figure comes from 4 lanes just stretched out into deeper waters. The 155, the difference between those two is a portion of a fifth lane, not the whole lane, so they can bring in just various reasons why they want to sort some folks out. Um, and I think as just we study further, we'll see what they can live with. We don't want to overbuild. Uh, it'll just cost more money, but I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Charlie. Judy, I see your hand is up.
I'm curious if you have already gotten some real data on the extension of the dock out there farther into the weather. The last time I raised this, excuse me, the last time I raised a question about it, the response was, well, we talked to the crew and said it would be no problem. Now, obviously, that's an anecdote. It's not data on weather, currents, etc. So is that something you've already done, or is that coming?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Judy. So you're interested if there has been any further study or information available about weather, and how that might impact a longer ferry dock. Charlie, my understanding is that the further analysis would come as part of NEPA-SEPA. Would you have anything to add in response to Judy's question?
Yeah, it's my understanding they did a quick check and the initial response was
Yeah,
it's probably going to be fine. We're only going at 240 additional feet or so. But later on in NEPA, I think we're going to look at that a lot closer. Just confirm that.
yeah. Yeah, given the direction that our weather, most of our weather comes from, I would think it would be a pretty serious consideration, not only for the crew and the boats, but obviously for passengers to have more of a ride than they anticipated out there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for keeping track of that, Judy. Um, Justin.
Hey, thanks. Just walking past Coleman Dock, so forgive me if it sounds a little rough. So I don't think the risk is overbuilding, and particularly as the state contemplates construction of new 160 car ferries and hopefully standardization of ferries across the fleet in the very long run. I'm concerned that we would underbuild much more than I'm concerned that we would overbuild. But let me just ask a process question. So even if the environmental assessment comes back and says that the full, NEPA and SEPA process isn't required, are you still required to select, identify alternatives for a NEPA and SEPA process? And is that why you haven't made a decision between the B and the B3 alternatives?
I think I might see if James, if you're wanted to answer that one.
James is our environmental consultant supporting Marcia and her team, and he is on the line.
James is looking for the unmute button.
Sorry to put
Thanks
you
for
on the
the
spot,
Put you on
James.
the spot.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, Justin, the plan is to develop a build alternative that's a kind of a synthesis of those B and B3 alternatives that fits within that envelope, if you will. So NEPA and the procedures we're assuming in EA require at least a build alternative and no build alternative analysis, and then presentation in the EA of what alternatives were considered as part of that process.
Sorry. So just to follow up there, does that mean that, did I hear that it'll be neither alternative B nor B3 as we've seen it presented, but some hybrid of the two then?
Justin, I think that's the assumption going into this. We don't want to be pre-decisional. FHWA is the lead agency and they direct that, but that's kind of the idea with taking the outcome of the Pell study and developing a build alternative that is a hybrid, yes.
Yeah, I know.
Back to the
I
slide
get that
that
you can't be
shows.
determinative or whatever the word is. But you're still allowed to have a preferred alternative, right? In advance of actually making a decision.
That's correct.
Or sorry, in advance of even going through the process, you're allowed to have a preferred alternative, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's what the Pell study is saying, that right now our proposed alternative is a hybrid of the B alternative, specifically B and B3.
And how many cars will that hybrid alternative hold?
124 to 155. Somewhere in
Come
there, as
on.
Charlie mentioned, depending on the final configuration of the dock with environmental taken into consideration.
And when does the proposal for the final configuration get made?
When did you know which number you mean? The capacity?
Yep.
I don't know, Charlie, do you know when in the process that detail is identified?
I do not.
Sorry. So if we're not making that process now as part of the CAG process or as part of the Pell process, we don't have any idea when we're going to make that decision.
Oh, during the NEPA chapter.
But I thought it had to be done before we walked into that,
No.
such that we had an alternative to present, a preferred alternative.
Yeah, I think, Justin, what we're saying, maybe a different way of saying it, is we've said we're not going to carry forward the 80 car dock and the 180 car dock alternatives, but we're focusing on that middle, longer, narrower alternative, and that another level of design is needed and more environmental study to sort of fit, as James said, within that envelope, exactly what the configuration would be.
And when does that other level of design occur?
During this next phase of the NEPA and SEPA environmental
The
review and
SEPA.
for their design.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry to talk now, but I'm unable to raise a hand.
That's okay.
So this is Marty. I had a question about there wasn't any mention of the temporary dock structure that was going to be needed during construction, and it seemed important in terms of overwater coverage and eelgrass and noise and et cetera. And I was just curious why that wasn't anything that was looked at this phase.
Thanks, Marty. Charlie, could you speak to Marty's question there about when will we be evaluating potential impacts of the temporary structure during construction?
Sure. Well, I heard Marty ask why we didn't do it during the Pell chapter. I think we looked at it kind of for kind of estimating reasons and to consider the schedule impact it could have. But at that planning level, we didn't look at it that closely. We do have it planned for the early part of the NEPA chapter,
Okay.
where we're going to come up with a number of ways you could replace this trestle and what they could look like, what their impacts will be, and then we'll just methodically go along and see what's the right way to move forward.
Is that anything that the public will have a chance to see where you're headed, or how would we be informed about this temporary
I
the
would,
need for it?
yeah.
Hadley,
I
do you
would
want
say,
to? Oh,
okay,
go ahead,
I'll leave it to
Charlie.
Hadley.
No,
Hadley?
Let's start, Charlie, and I'll fill in. How about that?
there you go.
I was going to say absolutely, because it's kind of connected to the level of service that will be provided during construction. It's it gets a little more complicated the more you dig into it. So I think that's appropriate to share with the public what we think the contract, how long it could take, and what level of service we're able to provide. Can we all live with that? And there'll be pros and cons to this decision. It won't be a slam dunk.
Yeah, I know I was getting a little ahead, but it just seems like it was something that would also be in the calculations that you're bringing forward to the NEPA, part. But thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't raise my hand, and I may have to jump in at another time, but it's time for someone else.
Marty, I was just going to add to that we're going to, as the start of this next phase, we'll be developing or updating our community engagement plan and identifying how we're going to do community engagement in this next phase, just because tonight's the last night of this particular community advisory group, and you've all hung in with us much longer than we initially told you were signing up for. Doesn't mean that we're not going to be engaging all of you and the rest of the community as well. And as Charlie said, I think a big topic of that is going to be the level of service during construction, and that will have to be part of the NEPA SEPA review because it ties into temporary structures and the duration of construction and all of that, but also something that we engage on anyway anytime we propose different service levels or new schedules. So something that the Vashon and Southworth communities are, of course, going to be tracking quite closely, but I think all of you in Fauntleroy as well, because it will go into the duration of construction and the sort of how the dock operates during construction.
This is Scott Harvey. Unfortunately, like Marty, I can't get my hand up.
Yeah, I don't see the hand raise feature live, Parker. I'm not sure if that's a feature you have to turn on or not.
But so I don't know what happened, but I just had a really quick question here. I thought the Washington Ferry's standard for docks, for new docks, was to have it be 1.5 times the size of the biggest boat that was, and I was wondering why that didn't happen at Fauntleroy.
Nicole, do you want to touch on that one? He's talking about the terminal design manual.
Right, yeah, in our terminal design manual, our guideline is 1.5 times the size of the vessel. But it's a guideline. It's a place to start. It's a place when we're looking ahead and developing estimates to send to the legislature to do a project. It's how it gives us a number, but how we really come up in the end with a final number is through the processes that we've gone through, interactions with our customers and the communities that we live in. And for Fauntleroy, the 124 to 155 really was able to balance all of the competing needs for this terminal, including eelgrass and other environmental effects. Hopefully
Well, the question I have here is, what other ferry terminal was built at less than 1.5?
Well, we have several that are less than 1.5.
No. What ones were built?
New.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of small things that have been out here, but since you set the standard at 1.5, which other terminal was not at 1.5?
I could probably say Coleman Dock is close to being under the standard. But we have since, and I don't know how many vehicles we hold at Clinton. And Mukilteo is the only other new terminal that we've put into place since the development of the design manual. And Mukilteo has
It just
more
seems
than
that
1.5.
it just seems that the 124 option is a long ways away from 1.5. 155, I think it's too small, but it's onwards. But the 124, I'm really onwards having challenges with it being so far off of the standard. Anyway,
No, that's a good comment. Thank you, Scott.
thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Judy, I see your hand's been up for a while.
Right. What I think might be helpful is to understand at what milestones of a project you would typically come to the community for feedback.
Yeah, that's a great question. Parker, do you want to put the timeline slide back up? And I wonder if Hadley could speak to that a little bit. And so you can see that visually, those different phases.
Yeah, sure. And Judy, some of that, we don't know the specifics because, as I mentioned, our next task is to develop a new community engagement plan to sit down with the team, look at the project schedule. Once FHWA determines the level of environmental review, we'll have a much better idea of what the next year or two will look like, and then develop an engagement plan around all of that. And that is a public document, and that's something we can certainly share with anyone who's interested in it and get comments. But, you know, in general, the engagement will not look very different from what we've had up till now, aside from not necessarily having these formal groups, but what we're considering is more general community outreach with public meetings similar to these types of Zoom meetings, sharing key information at key milestones, having comments on key decision points, and then sharing, updates on the project through all the various channels that we do now. So it'll be continuing at about the level that we've had through now. I guess I can ask sort of a general question of this group if there's interest in continuing to be part of a advisory group type of body. That's sort of, or if you're wanting to participate as sort of a member of the community. And I see that we have a number of other members of the community joining us tonight in the audience who are also interested in following along. So our thought was, instead of having a specific advisory group, that we would just have more chances like this to review information, answer questions at key milestones, and especially around things like service during construction and things that will definitely have an impact on the communities.
Oh, well, thank you, Hadley. I realize it can be nebulous at this point, but knowing at what decision points you would typically ask for feedback helps anticipate from this end. I don't have a particular interest in continuing with meetings, but I would certainly like to anticipate when I might be hearing from you folks again.
Okay, well, we'll make a commitment that we will share that draft community engagement plan with the CAG.
Mhm.
You know, even though you're not going to be officially CAG members by then, I know you've been following the process and will want to stay engaged. So we'll share that out and happy to take any input. But it will be around things like key decisional points as part of the environmental review, but also in the design process when Charlie's team gets to certain milestones of design, and then also through the development of construction phasing and levels of service.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
So I have another question, if I could. I enjoyed looking at a lot of the data, a lot of the comparisons. There was a one table comparing the number of piles that were going to be in the various zones, but I never understood exactly how many piles we're talking about and if there's really any difference between the two alternatives, B and B3, that you're putting forward. Because the pile driving and the piles themselves are big impacts to the community. And we've been encouraged by getting rid of the creosote, and we've been encouraged by the idea there'd be more vision through them and movement of currents. But is there a big difference between the piles, and how many are we talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Marty. So your question is about not only the difference in piles from today to the future terminal, but also if we know at this point the difference in piles between B and B3.
Well, Laura, that's well said, but I know that the piles are quite different, that they're larger and steel and not creosote. So I don't need that review. What I wanted to know is between B and B3, is there a lot of difference, or are they about the same number of piles? And so that's kind of the key question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Charlie, I think if you could speak to this and maybe answer Marty's question in terms of if we know between those two variations, the difference in number of piles.
I'll give it a shot. We did a brief study of different trestle types that are available for this type of project, and we haven't chosen any one. Eventually, we will choose one, and it could be applied to either the B3 or a hybrid. And I heard you asking about how many. I recall slightly over 100 was can't remember all the numbers I read, but it was slightly over 100. You need 2 full seasons of construction to put them in, and that, to be clear, we're not putting them in 24/7. They only put a few in per day or per week, and we're limited to what season we can actually drive those piles into the foundation. But we will be listening to your concerns about which if there's a preference. We'll certainly be talking to our geotechnical engineers and deciding on what diameter they are. It's my understanding that these larger ones could probably hold more, but we haven't figured that part out yet.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just add there's a chart in the PEL document on page 27, 28 that has the number of piles
Oh, thank you.
estimated.
Oh,
Yeah. I
well,
just
that's
remember
just for
seeing
that
it
one
when I was
area, though.
once again.
It's not the total number. It's just for the particular zones.
Well, the last column is the total though.
What's it read? 380?
Well, existing is 547, B is 246, and B3 is 168.
Oh,
Thank you, Fletcher.
So yeah. So they're all a lot less than current, but
168 is a lot less than, yeah, good.
Yeah.
Laura, there's a comment from a member of the Vashon Fair Advisory Committee is listening in the community, and Gary is asking us to read it.
Oh,
So Wendy is wondering why we're not including a future second slip.
yes,
Charlie,
Charlie.
answer that out loud just so everyone can hear it.
Yeah, Charlie, do you want to answer that out loud for everyone?
Sure. I wanted to back up. There was an earlier comment about the 1.5 time capacity that Nicole answered. I would have added to that our instructions were maybe there's another feature that you can consider adding to your project that could help reduce that size. That would have been 186 cars, and one of them was good to go. That maybe if we could figure out how to use a good to go, we could have a slightly smaller trestle. Another one was overhead loading, and the third one was a second slip. So we have not, we've heard people ask for those, but we have not really studied them. We could study them in the Pell, I'm sorry, in the NEPA chapter, but that would be a reason why you would need quite as large of a trestle to meet your schedule. If you had essentially you could have a smaller trestle closer to 124, but it might kick in a second slip. I don't think that's going to happen. I really think what we're going to do is we're going to not preclude a future one for this next generation that comes after us. They may be wondering, the community's changed and it's time for, we've had growth here. We need another slip. We want to at least make it as efficient as possible for that to happen. But again, I don't see it happening as on this project, but I think it's something we should study some more. We've heard a lot of people ask about it, so we'll study it more, the overhead loading and the second slip. But we don't want to preclude them from being used in the future.
Thanks, Charlie, and thank you, Gary, for elevating that question.
Yeah, actually, that wasn't my question, but
Oh, okay, go.
I,
Would you like to
I
chime
just
in?
wanted to mention that tomorrow night, the Vashon Community Council is having a meeting. And in that meeting, I'm being nominated to be the official representative between the Vashon Community Council and Washington State Ferries. So the meeting tomorrow evening will be interesting. We're going to have to wait until the Pell is actually released before we can actually start having those discussions at the Community Council meeting. But we're making good progress. As we're identifying here, we still have a few things left to do. So thank you.
Yeah, Gary, I saw that you were up for nomination. That's great. And I know Justin and Wendy need someone else to join their little mighty of two. So that'd be great.
Yep. Well, and being involved in this process has been remarkably helpful because understanding the detail that goes into this process. And one thing I'll mention is and people may not have been at the meeting, there was a discussion about the future growth because my question was, you have a 2040 plan, and the question becomes, well, what happens at 2050 or 2060?
Yeah.
And the discussion was made at that point is that we're not planning, let me rephrase it. There's a discussion about trying to build for this huge future. But on the other hand, what the communities are doing is they're trying to build so there's more mass transit. So rather than build a bigger slip for a future car load, maybe a slip design that will handle mass transit better. So it's an interesting dynamic, and we're kind of on the forefront because not a lot of places are dealing with this kind of a ferry load that we have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
If anybody else wants to jump in, they can. I had something that's since most of your answers to our questions are, maybe we'll keep studying that, or maybe we'll be looking at that in the next phase. I wanted just to float something out that all of the communities could hear, which is that you consider a radically different schedule during construction. Since it takes almost exactly the same amount of time to drive from Southworth to Fauntleroy as it does to Ferry, sometimes more, sometimes less, but during construction, this is extremely difficult. Difficult, no holding space, sometimes none, no room to sort vehicles. And so consider installing a schedule where 2 boats go back and forth to Vashon and 1 boat goes back and forth to Southworth. If someone wants to ferry to Kitsap, they buy a Vashon price ticket and they get off on Vashon and they get back on. And the fees are simplified. You don't have to change all that. And what this does is eliminate sorting at Fauntleroy. All cars go to the same place and every boat is the right boat. And unless you need 2 boats, there's no change in really any other thing. So it's cheaper and faster to drive around now, and people in Southwest still choose to ferry. So I'm sure there'll be some thoughts and objections to it, but I just wanted to put that out as I am very concerned about the construction phase, which is years away, but 4 years long when it happens, and it will be really difficult for our ferry communities, the ones that are the neighborhood I'm in, but also everyone who's trying to use the ferries.
Thanks, Marty. And I saw Mark taking some notes. He and his team are going to be starting working on various service scenarios and ferry schedules during construction as we know more about the construction phasing. So that's good input, and we'll certainly be relying on you with all your scheduling knowledge to help provide input as we go along.
Well, that's complimentary. I think that the key thing is that we need to, as you say, look at operations and what can we do with operations that would really make it more efficient. And so that's an idea.
Thanks, Marty. Speaking of Mark, he does have an update for us on the intersection improvements. We'll just pause to see if there are any final questions on the Pell study report. We do anticipate having some time later on for more discussion.
And I see a member of our audience has a hand up. We're not taking verbal questions from the audience, but if you want to put it in the Q&A box and we can answer it there and read it out to the group, that would be great.
Sadly.
Maybe we just move along, Laura, and we can circle back to it.
Yeah, that sounds.
Chuck put his hand down, so if you have a question or comment, please type it in the Q&A box.
Okay. Okay, Parker, I think you can, move us along to intersection improvements.
Okay, good evening, all. Good to see you all again, and I want to add my thanks to your thoughtful engagement throughout our process. And I'm going to touch on intersection improvements, specifically the traffic signal. So since we last connected with you all, we've been working on completing the design for the traffic signal and coordinating that with the city of Seattle, who would be the operator of the signal once it's complete. And look to have that the traffic signal design go out for bid by contractors here soon and begin construction hopefully early next year. So go to the next slide. So just wanted to refresh and go through just the configuration of the intersection and the signal, just overview of how it would operate. You've all heard this before, but it doesn't hurt to kind of refresh this, that essentially this will work like many of the other ferry terminals that have a traffic signal at there where they intersect the local street. So the traffic signal will move Fauntleroy Way traffic northbound and southbound. There's no change in the number of lanes on Fauntleroy. And then it'll interrupt that flow for a pedestrian that's crossing at the crosswalk that's on the right side of the graphic, somebody that's going to or from the bus stops or walking to the ferry terminal. And then, of course, the other time that the traffic signal will stop Fauntleroy traffic is when the ferry arrives and begins to unload. And the signal will have detection for the departing traffic coming off the ferry. And so it won't just interrupt when there's no need to do that. And then, as we've talked before, it had that detection can detect how far the queuing is in terms of the arrival. So it'll basically time the signal commensurate with how many vehicles are coming off, but it won't run in a steady state necessarily and fully, because of the where the ferry transfer span is to the signal will allow it to kind of arrive and vehicles to get off in pulses, and then they go through the intersection, and then it can serve Fauntleroy traffic again, while it waits for the next set of vehicles to arrive and queue up and then depart. And this also helps keep, as a reminder, one of the considerations in this is with the C line, the rapid ride metro route that runs along Fauntleroy, keeping that on time in terms of reliability of moving those passengers into and out of downtown Seattle and over to White Center, Roxbury area. Couple things to note here. The configuration coming off the dock is pretty similar today, but there's a slight detail I'll call out here in the drawing, which is you'll see a separation between the left and right turn lanes coming off the terminal, where we don't have enough room in the existing configuration there to get in a bike box, but we provided what space we could for if a bicyclist is coming off and going to turn left and go north on Fauntleroy Way. They have a bit of a space to kind of set themselves up to make that turn. So that's what's kind of reflected in the kind of purplish colored arrow there. And the other thing, just to call out and reinforce, is that this does have northbound turning traffic coming off the terminal in the left lane and southbound turning traffic in the right lane. That's how the lanes are configured today, and that is how what we call the rules of the road for traffic engineering and traffic driver responsibility is to turn left from a left lane and right from a right lane. And with the addition of the signal, we're pretty confident that this will serve the flow coming off the ferry and keep the ferry service on time. And then the one last thing to also call out is that northbound Fauntleroy Way, the note in the lower right is that the left turn onto the dock will not be allowed, and much as it is today. So that's the overview of the configuration and the operations. And then the last thing I'll say is once the signal becomes operational, as I mentioned, the City of Seattle is the operator. Once it's in operations, both WSF, Washington State Ferries, and SDOT will coordinate and make sure that the operation is working for traveling public going north and south on Fauntleroy, as well as for unloading ferry traffic coming off the terminal. So just preface that one, when you start up a brand new signal, there's a settling in period where the operations staff look at it and review it and kind of start to tweak it and fine tune it. And we're hoping that will all be done before the peak summer traffic season next year. The one other thing I'll call out here as a transition I'm going to go through some visualizations. One thing you might have picked up on, but if not, one thing we did in the signal design was do a combined pole for where what we call the mast arm signal display sits. So it helps us have a fewer number of poles to not only save costs, but minimize the number of poles, which can relate to the visualizations. And you've all asked, some of you have asked for some visualizations of what this would look like. So we have a series of slides that will first look here from on Fauntleroy itself, and then we have a couple that are from Captain's Park, which is up on the upper left there. So this is looking southbound as you travel towards the terminal from the north. So you can see the signal displays and what it looks like for the ferry holding lane, as well as then traffic that is going through on Fauntleroy Way. We can go to the next slide. This is what it looks like if you're on the ferry dock coming off. Again, you can see the pole, the traffic signal there, and about the middle of the slate to the right of the middle of the picture there. And you can see that Again, that single pole with the two mast arms that show basically have the displays go for the ferry terminal and then north and south on Fauntleroy Way. And now let's go to the next slide. And now we'll go up to what it's looking like from Captain's Park. And so we have two views from here. So this is at the very southerly end of Captain's Park. And so this, as you can see, is where that mast arm is most visible. For a point of reference, this is a person that's, not on the order of a 5'10", 6 foot tall person that took this picture. So it's trying to represent literally from an eye height. And so obviously this is where it's most visible, but you can still see off to the left and the right. And then let's go to the last viewpoint we have. So this is the remainder of the representative of the view from the remainder of Captain's Park, and which is the majority of it. This is the view, and so you see the traffic signal mast arm off to the left. And so really, in this case, when you're in this part of the park, it's not really altering the view that substantially as you look out over the water. And the last thing I'll touch on is often with new traffic signals, you can sometimes see at the top of the mast arm or the signal pole a street light, a luminaire pole. That is not present in this one because we did a lighting analysis, the team did, and found that the existing luminaires that you see in the right side of the picture and on other existing utility poles out there provide a sufficient amount of lighting. And so again, with respect to this, is really beneficial in that we don't need to have a luminaire pole on top of the mast arm, which again would be adjacent to the park here. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on the signal operations points or feedback on the visualization slides.
Thanks, Mark. Judy, I see your hand is up. Looks like you're still on mute, Judy.
I know. I get there. I trust, Mark, that you're in conversation with SDOT. The traffic, ferry-bound traffic coming down the hill westbound to the terminal at this point can stay on an arterial until it gets there. The configuration that you envision would prohibit those vehicles from turning left to the toll booth. The culvert construction in the area that is to start next spring will affect the availability of side streets. And of course, nobody wants arterial traffic regularly diverted onto their side street. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge during that culvert construction, but also ongoing. How are people coming down the hill supposed to get far enough north not to have to turn left onto the terminal?
Yeah, Judy, I'll touch on two things. Obviously, the culvert construction of the city in terms of like coordinating those things absolutely would be making sure that I didn't touch on that in terms of how this project would be built is Fauntleroy traffic would be maintained on Fauntleroy. There may be times when there's likely going to be times when a flagger needs to be out there to temporarily stop traffic. But those two aspects would be coordinated as we get into the construction. And you're right, there's not you don't want arterial traffic getting diverted onto neighborhood collector streets. I'll just reminder, there's today, the left turn is restricted at times. And we did talk through with the city about whether that is a time of day restriction or a full-time restriction, and where it sits right now is that the collective decision was it would be a full-time left turn prohibition. And then so what people will need to do is either pick a different arterial route to go that way, or they go further up Fauntleroy Way and find the appropriate opportunity to make a U-turn or go around the block and come back in. So That's the similar scenario today, when it's restricted, obviously. But
I trust you'll be monitoring that when you get a chance.
Yep, we'll definitely be talking with the city about that. That's correct, Judy.
Thanks, Judy. Susan.
There we go. I guess mine's kind of just falling right off of Judy's question. I was wondering if the city or Washington State Ferries might consider keeping that left turn when you're approaching from the south, when times allow, because if you're coming back late from the airport and such, it's really nice to be able to just turn in there when there's just no traffic around. So maybe that's something that could be in one of those first studies of how it's actually working.
Yeah, basically do a time of day version, Susan. Right? Is that what you're?
Yeah, just having, I mean, because I do understand it's not appropriate to allow the left turn when it's the peak traffic times, but when it's low traffic times, it feels, I just can anticipate some people just ignoring that sign. So it'd be nice to not have it be an illegal turn. Yeah. And then I also noticed in those visualizations that when you're approaching the terminal from the north, it looks like it says no turn on red to turn into the ferry. And how will that be? I'm sorry if I missed it, but how will that be like figured out? Like how will that right turn turn green
Yeah,
and not?
yeah. So just Susan, you were talking about the southbound coming into the ferry terminal, right?
Yes.
And
Thank you.
so yeah, what you might have seen this around increasingly around the city, that having where you can restricting a right on red from a vehicle and a pedestrian crossing safety perspective is being done. And so the way that is tied is to the pedestrian crossing. And so it basically would be when the pedestrian is crossing, and then that signal will turn green and let people go onto the dock.
Does that mean that you're saying that if a pedestrian's going north south, there'll be one of those buttons or something that they hit that makes that okay, thanks.
Correct.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
So I'd like to jump in again if I could on the same issue, just expanding at that. The signs at 35th indicate, this is the direction you need to go if you're going to get to the ferry. And I'm wondering if you could enhance those or figure those out better. I have the best driveway for people to turn into, and it's the largest one, and it is used constantly. And they come in at a very rapid rate, and they hit my garage door. So I think that this pattern, to Susan's statement, is one that people will have difficulty initially, anyway, with it. And anyway, we could improve the signages as access from the north only, or directional signs placed in other parts of the route down the hill. That's just another thought.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marty. And I'm sorry people are running into your garage. That's not fun. Yeah, we can follow up with the city on are there some signing enhancements that can better clarify paths and expectations for drivers.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring up a comment or question that came in through the chat, Mark. Have these traffic signal discussions included transit signal prioritization? Is that something that the team thought about?
The answer is yes. We have been certainly setting it up for that from a design perspective. I'll need to check back on where the final decision was. Let's see, I think Taylor, are you on? Maybe you can chime in here. But yes, working with King County Metro as well as obviously the city, maintaining reliability for the rapid ride is important consideration here. So, and also just I'm aware the city is in the process of actually deciding upon signal systems in terms of their next iteration that across the city that provides that priority for transit capabilities. Taylor, are you able to confirm where we landed on that from the signal design perspective?
Yeah, so the traffic signal timing and design is going to King County later tonight. It's part of our 100% submittal. We have been coordinating with them.
Taylor, does it include transit prioritization?
My recollection is that they did not request that. I was frantically trying to pull up my notes to confirm, but that is my recollection. So I will keep looking and update if I find something otherwise. Sorry,
Yeah,
Mark.
what I can tell everyone is that a signal like this brand new in the city is designed to be capable of doing that. So it's not a how do I say it? It's not a heavy lift to add it and have it be a part of the operations.
Okay, thank you. Chuck, it sounds like that's something we'll just look into that, but and continue monitoring it. Any other questions about the intersection operations? So Justin, I see your question there from motorcycle bicycle lane is still part of the new terminal design, and if so, how would those users access the terminal? Charlie, do you want to speak to that one, or Mark?
I can only answer the first half. So yes, they're entering the terminal on the north end of the new trestle. There will be a bicycle lane and a motorcycle lane, and exiting, in addition to the two exit lanes we have today, we'll have a bicycle lane added to that. And I know, Mark, we've had talks about the motorcycle, how that'll happen operationally, and Trevor's tried to respond, but I, I I defer to you.
Yeah, I think, Justin, just to further, obviously the patterns will be similar today to get to the terminal. But then once you're at the terminal and get through the booths, you'll have your own lanes, or in the departing case, as Charlie said, a lane that comes to this intersection where we have the bike symbols, so that a good number of the cyclists turn left, they would be able to get to where that bike symbol is in their own lane / bike box and get onto the northbound bike line. And I would say that, just kind of back to the earlier discussion you were all having about the terminal configuration, dock configuration, in this sorting, that is something that if Trevor was here, he would be talking about. That is the sorting of motorcycles and other vehicle types is one of the merits and benefits they see of some of those different configurations in that B footprint or envelope.
Okay. One more audience question, really follow-up question to that is about the bike lanes. Will the exit lanes be wider? And if so, will that decrease the size of the parking space? Charlie, is that something you know the answer to?
The question, decrease the size of the parking space if they're referring to the triangular parking lot?
Yes, the parking
I
lot.
believe so, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, the parking lot.
Yes. So the alternative that we're advancing into NEPA currently shows, yes, it does decrease the parking lot some 6 feet. Again, this is preliminary. I don't think that the final number will be 6 feet, but it's currently showing that yes, approximately 6 feet of that lot is removed.
Thanks, Charlie. Our last few slides, or next slide, Charlie is sharing an update on the real estate process.
All right. A lot of you folks haven't had this view of the house that neighbors the ferry terminal and the King County lift station, but this is the White House, and we are working to acquire it. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the update on the process. The tenants vacated the house, again, currently owned by King County, at the end of September, just a few weeks ago. And then I thought it's important to note that King County and Washington State Ferry Security are doing sweeps periodically, at least daily, just to keep an eye on the house. See, King County plans to transfer ownership to the state in the first quarter of 2021. And then it was our plans to do some type of renovation so that the house is usable as a construction administration facility. Haven't quite figured that part out, but that's the next step after ownership is transferred to us. And then after ownership, we also would like to use it as a storage space, maybe a break room for some of our staff, but make it look occupied, used, and the hope is keep people out of it that we don't want in it. Let's see, our next steps. I guess as we close out today's meeting, let me quickly outline the next stages of the project. So we mentioned we're going to finalize the Pell study report next. And then second, the Federal Highway Administration will review our recommended alternative, provide approval to move forward, and identify the necessary level of environmental review. Okay, third, and finally, we will share an update with the community when our environmental review phase starts and about what to expect and how to stay involved. Let's see, as Hadley mentioned earlier, we're committed to continuing community engagement efforts throughout the environmental review phase and into the design stage as well. Now I'll provide some time for any last minute questions before we wrap up tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Charlie. Judy.
Well, Charlie, I'm curious, are people still working for the Federal Highway Agency? I mean, is this project going to be caught in a very long, slow queue because of lack of personnel?
Judy, I don't have that. I don't have that crystal ball. I don't think I can answer that.
Nicole, do you have anything to add on that one? Have you heard me?
Well, definitely not having the federal government open will impact or slow us down. But it really is how long the federal shutdown lasts.
Yeah. And I guess I could ask a similar question about potential funding. What's the crystal ball on that in terms of federal monies that may or may not be forthcoming?
That's a great question. Currently for this project, it's state funded.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Judy, important questions. Anything else, Susan?
Just real quick, I'm sorry if I missed this, but when do you anticipate finalizing the Pell?
That is a great question. Charlie, do you want to speak to that?
Hey, James, you can let me know if I'm wrong, but my crystal ball says in the next month or two.
Seems right, Charlie.
Okay, thanks. Just people will ask me. So
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll share out the final. I mean, I don't think it's going to look too different from what you have, but we'll be sharing out the final with you and posting it on the website and all the rest of that when we get to that milestone.
And I'd just like to add that with any of our major projects such as this, we've talked a little bit about public engagement, and we are always open. If a community has an event and you want to invite us to talk about the project, we're always open to that. We'll have, as Hadley talked about, we will have discrete open houses and specific public events. But Charlie lives right up the road, and he'd be happy to come down and talk with a advisory group or a community group at any time. So
Yes, I'll second that. And we'll be in touch with all of you. And I guess if we're out of questions, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you who've been with us since the beginning and all the time and energy and thought you've put into this process. It's been extremely invaluable. And when you think back to where we were when we started and talking about all these different locations and different options and sort of narrowing it down to what, although it doesn't seem like it has the level of detail that many of you want that will come in future phases, I think we've come a long way in the progress of the planning and decision making around this project. So that's all thanks to the help that you've all provided.
I would echo that, as again, I was not involved, but looking from afar, pretty impressive what you all accomplished together. Thank you.
And I too want to say thank you everyone for hanging in there with us. I am quite aware we live in a world where when people differ with one another, uh, they can be real nasty. And I really appreciate that you were very civil and you listened to one another and you helped us. You provided us with a lot of information to think about, to help shape a project that really can work for all of us. So I want to be part of a project team that has a project that is well received by the community, not just by one community, but by the greater good. So thanks for all the information you gave us, and I look forward to hearing from you some more.
Yeah, and that was our initial goal. We didn't think we'd get somewhere with an alternative that everybody loves, but at least we're at a place where hopefully you understand how we got here and some of the important trade-offs and constraints that go into deciding on the final option and what ultimately gets built. And if you still feel like you have questions, this is the end of this formal group in this process, but we're still here. We're still going to be working on the project and we'll be in touch, and feel free to reach out by the same email address, or you can reach me directly with any further follow-ups and questions that you may have.
thanks for the opportunity. It was really a pleasure to be part of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks all of
Thank
you.
you. Thank you everyone for joining
Have
us
a great
this
night,
evening.
everybody.
I think we can go ahead and close out. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.